Okay, today's the 5th day of Tishrei, I have no idea, 6th? 7th of October. And the day on which the biggest pogrom since the Holocaust was committed, according to their civil calendar. And we're in chapter 23, I believe. I think we made it to 23 of Shorosh Mitzvah Tefillah in Derech Mitzvah Secha. But let me see, I'm not sure that we made it that far. No, we're still in 22. Okay, so I don't exactly remember where we were. It was a long time ago. We're somewhere at the top of Kuf Kaf Zayin. Okay, in any case, we saw that Chokhmah has two stages. Before and after it comes down into this world. So the Chokhmah usually is entirely in the world of Atzilus, in the world of emanation, it's entirely above any kind of division. And we talked about this. We said that the mashal for this is that if you want to break something, you need something that's unbreakable. If you want to shatter a stone into pieces, you want a gavel, you want a chisel. So you need to have something that's very hard, that it itself will not break into pieces. And that's how Chokhmah is. The Chokhmah itself is unbreakable, it doesn't divide. And because of that, it's what's used in order to divide the Gdudim, the sources of the letters in the heart, into pieces. So that's what wisdom does. But then it has another, again, this state where, meaning before it was entirely unbreakable and it wasn't used for anything. Now, when it comes down, it's used like a chisel in order to break. V'sheyumshach, so we're 7 lines from the top. V'sheyumshach b'bchinat chokhmah liot an chakim hu yirida gdola al derech ma'amar hazeh b'mkom gdulato sham ata motze an v'tanuto. And like we said, Hashem himself, he's using these as instruments. So for Hashem to come down into this wisdom that's able to chisel, that's able to break the sources of the letters into many letters and then also to put them together. We said those were the two states of Chokhmah. On the one hand it breaks it, on the other hand it's also matzref lechokhmah, which is a phrase from Mishlei, from Proverbs, meaning it also combines the letters together. You can easily think about that. You can use a hammer to break something, but you can also use a hammer to connect things that are connectable together. Like use it for a nail or for anything that you have some way of connecting. So for Hashem to come down into this is called, in the place of His greatness, that's where you find His humility. Why is humility? Because His humility is that He's willing to enclose Himself, to appear as this wisdom. שהגדולה עצמה נמשכה על ידי ענוותנותו להשפיל את עצמו במידת גדולה דכולה חשיב ממש. He gives here an incredible principle, which is, we usually hear that what is Hashem's greatness? That He's willing to humble Himself. But He says, you can also read this the opposite. The cause and effect here is the opposite. The fact that He has humility, that's what causes His greatness. You look at a great person. You ask, how do you become a great person? He did this and this and this and this. Most people don't start by saying he became a great person by being humble. They don't think that that's how it works. Right? But there's a phrase from the sages. It's also a metaphor that they use. מה שעשתה היראה עקב לסולייתה, עשתה ענווה עקב or something like that לחוכמתה. So there, what they're saying is that the heel of love of God is fear of God, and the heel of greatness is humility. What does it mean, the heel? It's what it stands on. You have to stand on something in order to be a great person. So there's this phrase that people started saying sometime in the 20th century because they wanted women to feel better. So they said, behind every great man stands a great woman. And so Rav Steinsaltz used to say that it's behind every great man stands a woman surprised. How did he become that? I don't know him that way. But the truth is that behind or under every great person there stands a lot of humility. That without humility he couldn't become this. Humility is anava. Good. So he says that really it's the humility that draws down the wisdom. That's how Hashem becomes, seemingly, how Hashem becomes great. It's the humility that draws it down. It's the same thing in the person. There's what people think I'm going to be great by imagining what I'm going to be like. But really, it's how humble I am. The more humble a person is, the more things come to him. What does that mean? So the understanding, and we have to get a little bit into it, I don't want to get too much into it, is that in every soul there's a reservoir of many, many talents that's sitting above. It's like sitting above me. I'm not conscious of them. No person is conscious of his latent talents, of his hidden talents. He doesn't know them. That's why they're unconscious. What opens it up? The humility that he has. It's like that the humility makes a vessel and then it can begin to drip down. If you don't make a vessel, there's nowhere for it to come. Right. So if you only have pride, meaning you say, I'm this, there's no vessel below to contain. So even when it drips down, there's nothing to collect it. It's like an age-old question of what comes first, the vessel or the light. So sometimes it seems like first there's light, and then the Arizal says, "Mitabuta orot nitavu kelim." From the thickening of the light, the vessels were formed. That's a lot of times the way it seems. But that's only in the intermediate stages. Really, when you're looking at the highest, this is also the topic of the daily Tanya now, Pistol 20, talks about this in length, that there's a completely different system which says that first you have to have a vessel, there has to be a leap into the vessel, and only then the light can come down. In other words, where do we see that? For instance, in Elisha. When Elisha went to see this woman who came to him crying that she was Ovadiah's wife. And she came to him crying and saying to him that your servant, my husband, died. He didn't just die, Izebel killed him. Isabel, she killed him for hiding the prophets of Hashem. And now the debtors want to come and take our children, my children, as servants, which they can. So what am I going to do? So he says, what do you have at home? She says, all I have is a nasuch shamin. I have a cruse of oil. So he says to her, okay, so gather many, many vessels, go to your neighbors, all your neighbors, loan as many vessels as you can, and then take the asuch, take the cruse, and begin to pour into the vessels. The debtors, they had, because he was for a whole year, he was providing food for 100 people that he was hiding in a cave. Debtor, the Baal Chov. So she starts pouring them in. She says, don't look at the cruse, just keep pouring in. And it kept giving more and more and more oil. She filled who knows how many vessels, as many as she could loan. and then it stopped. The moment that all the vessels were full, the oil was finished. So that's the example of the vessel bringing down the sustenance, the effluence. The vessel, you have to have a vessel first in order for the light to come down. And the same thing is true in a person's life. The genius of many people is creating a vessel. By the way, what's the vessel? When you look at the smartest people in the world, you'll see that they are constantly learning. And to learn, you have to be humble. You have to sit in front of someone else, either it's a person, or you're sitting in front of a book, and you're acting like, I don't know anything. If you start with, I know everything, I have nothing to learn from here, you're not going to get anything.
So Trump built the ice rink that was failing in New York 30 years ago. He took it over.
With the one in Central Park.
Ice rinks, yeah. And he says, well, I don't know, but he said the hockey rinks in Canada are the best. He went to the ones that do you understand?
And he asked him, how do you do that?
How do you do it?
Yeah. I used to tell my kids, I wanted to teach them what it means to learn from someone. So I took them on YouTube to the lowest thing I could think of. So I showed them a halftime show. Halftime show in college football. So you have college football, their halftime shows are all these crazy, the band, the marching band does all these patterns and things. And so I asked them, how do you do this? How do you get 100 people who are at the same time playing music, coordinated enough that they can do all this and they can't see what they're doing? How do you do that?
That's good, yeah.
So they thought and said, there's only one way to do it. You have to learn from someone who knows. You can't invent it. The real things in the world are not invented. They're improved. Meaning somebody already, we have a tradition about how to do it, and you learn from that tradition, and then you improve it. You have to have the vessel first. And that's the vessel that he's talking about here. That many times, even by Hashem, the order is reversed. He makes the vessel before he makes the light. It could be that the light existed first, but he doesn't bring the light until the vessel is ready. So what he's saying here is that the shiflus, his lowliness, his anvetanuto, sorry, not the shiflus, the anvetanut, which is his humility, is what draws down the greatness. Vinei hamshacha, and what's the greatness? The greatness is the wisdom. Vinei hamshacha zu al yedei b'chinat v'rav chesed. We talked about the rav chesed. Shu ha-chesed shelemala ma'chokhma. V'hu b'chinat מים שיורדים מגבוה לנמוך ונמשך בחינת נוצר חסד, נוצר אותיות צינור. דהיינו שנמשך השפע בחינת צמצום גדול. So it says, how is it possible for this wisdom which is infinite to come down? So it has to have some kind of contraction. Everything has to have some kind of contraction in order to come down. That's why I said before that the talents that a person has, they drip down. They don't come as a flood. The reason they don't come as a flood, this is a big principle that I repeat a lot. If a person has things coming to them easily, they will wash over him. They will be like a flood. You can't contain them. Anything that has permanence, that has consistency, that has a real effect on your life is something that happens slowly. It happens by contraction. It doesn't happen quickly. Now there are moments in life that you have to make a decision and you have to decide, I'm going to do something, but again, the benefits of it will be slow. It won't happen all at once. And anything that's destructive to life usually works the other way around. It's like the floodgates opening suddenly, and you're washed over, and nothing's left from it afterwards. So the same thing is here. There has to be some tzinor, he says. Tzinor is in Kabbalah, it's always it's a conduit, means a conduit or a pipe. Yeah, literal meaning is a pipe, but it means a conduit. It's always related to ratzon. So we take the word ratzon and we turn it into tzinor. So will becomes a conduit. What he's saying is that there has to be will before for the wisdom to come down in the proper way. Why he's saying all this here is because he's describing how it is to speak. Remember, we're talking about how there is to speak. So to speak, there has to be another first. There has to be first humility. In the Baal Shem Tov's language, we discussed this a little bit. This is called achna. It's called submission. That the person has to first of all submit. What are you submitting? taking away my ego. I'm not going to speak from where my ego is. I want to speak from a place of humility, from a place of being a vessel. The Baal Shem Tov language, that's called achna'ah. Then comes avdalah, then comes the separation, then comes the sweetening, which is the speaking itself, but we'll get into that later. But right now, the important part is that the humility in the person is cutting away the ego, that I don't speak from where my ego is. Meaning when I come to speak to Hashem, also when I daven, it's the same thing. It has to start from a place of humility. Okay, so let's end here, and let's continue tomorrow.